Dave with Taboo Customs. This video today we are going to be installing one of our Taboo Customs rust repair kits on this 2004 Toyota 4Runner that we've got here behind me. Now this rust repair kit's going to be to repair the area just behind the front A-arms for the suspension, where there is a cross member that goes across. It's also just behind the engine. It tends to rust out right there. A lot of vehicles do, because that's usually where the frame starts to dip down, so a lot of things will collect right at that dip. So what we'll do first here though is we are going to take a look at the issue we have with this one, and so you can check yours out and see if you have something similar and see if this will work for you. So as mentioned, we are right here behind the front suspension A-arm, where we have the cross member that holds the A-arm, meets the frame, and then goes back. You can already see here as we look underneath the frame the typical holes that can develop right here in this area. Typically there's holes that develop underneath where that seam is from the two halves of the frame meet. We often also see a hole on the inside, and you can kind of see it back there. That hole is not supposed to be there. That frame is actually really filled up with debris too right inside there. We're going to end up cutting that open, dragging all that out, and we'll show you that here in a little bit. But before we get to starting to clean up the frame, let's take a quick look at the kit. Okay, so here we have the kit, and it's really not too complex of a kit. The pieces for the kit is we've got the bottom piece here. We've actually added a drain hole that will open up so that debris can come out of the frame, which is pretty often nowadays you don't have drain holes or anything where debris can actually get out of the frame, so the frames just fill up with rust and mud and salt and sand and everything else. Here we got our outside plate, a larger inside plate, and then a small triangular piece so that we can tie in that A-arm cross member as it goes across the frame, just to make sure that we're adding some additional structure into this. So one thing I want to say before I get started is that of course there's a lot of variation to this. You will have a lot of variation in how much your Toyota is rusted. So if it's rusted a whole lot more than this, or in areas that basically get outside of what this kit is going to cover, you will either need to supply additional parts to add that additional structure in, or find another option for you. You know, a lot of these Toyotas will rust in a lot of areas on the frame. Oftentimes what we find is that it's not, if you catch it early enough, it won't be massive issues, but if you let it go and there's you know, half this frame is gone, you know, this kit isn't going to work for you. But so with that, I'm going to get started. First thing we're going to do is we're going to take a needle scaler to the frame. We're going to needle scale this whole area, and then we're going to cut this area open on the bottom, and we're basically just going to start raking all of the stuff that's inside the frame out, and so you'll see quite a bit of it come out. So let's get started. So for the next step, we've gone and we've touched up the back sides of our plates with some Weld Thru Primer, as you can see. We've also gone in and touched up the raw edges that we created when we cut open the frame with some Weld Thru Primer as well. Now we're going to put the plates onto the frame, and this here is the bottom plate. It's contoured to fit the frame. Now whenever we go to install this, we're going to have to use some clamps and push a little bit to get this to flush up to the frame, because the frame is curved at this section. We will put it right in here in that cross member, just on that first step, and that way we can tie that cross member into this new bottom section pretty well. The back edge will basically be flush with the outside of this body mount. Then we're going to go ahead and mark it out. Now what we're going to do is we're going to go in there and clean up all the rust in those areas. Now with these Toyota frames, we're usually able to install this bottom piece, weld it solid, and then install the side pieces over top of it. That way we get a good weld for this bottom piece across both sides of the original frame, and then we tie in that new material to that bottom piece, and we have something that's really solid to be able to weld to. Now, it's really key at this point though that you spend a lot of time cleaning up these areas where you're going to weld. Your quality of welds is really, on any kind of rusty frame, going to depend on how well you can get all that rust cleaned up and get down to good material. So you're going to see us using a die grinder, we're going to use a wire wheel, we'll use a straight die grinder, so a lot of different things to make sure we get all of those areas cleaned up. All right, now with the bottom cleaned up, we're ready to start welding the bottom piece on. Whenever you're putting the bottom piece on, up here at the front with this cross member here, we'll want to make sure we don't want it next to where the cross member is welded. We actually put it up into the step of the cross member. Now this will actually push it down, so it'll leave a little bit larger gap between the plate and the bottom of the frame. But what we're going to do is we're going to put it up there. We're going to attack it right here in the center to the cross member, and we're going to attack it back here where it hits the frame, about in the middle. And then we'll actually use a hammer, and we'll go ahead and close those gaps with a hammer, because any gaps here, your liberal use of the hammer is going to be fine. You want to close those gaps up. The biggest thing is you want good welds, you want strong welds, so make sure to close those up. And then we'll work on getting this back section pushed up against the bottom of the frame, because it is a little bit curved here at the bottom. So let me get my helmet and my leathers on, and we'll get started tacking this up. So similar to the bottom plate, now we're going to want to take the outside plate and the inside plate and mark those out as well. Now both plates, since this area of the frame is not flat anywhere, both these plates are also going to have to be squeezed or manipulated. We'll use a large 6-inch or 8-inch C-clamp to basically clamp those plates into the frame. But first we've got to get the area marked out to clean up the frame. Now the outside plate, you can decide how much you want to overlap this body mount. Depending on how much you overlap this flange on the body mount, it will depend on how much you have to get that weld cleaned up there as well, because you're going to weld next to the weld. You really have to have that weld area cleaned up. If you're going to weld it up to the body mount, you can clean up the kind of the corner of the body mount there. However, it will also affect how far you have to squeeze that outer piece in. Now the inner piece is a little simple. It doesn't really overlay anything. We'll take a look at that here in just a second. All right, so you can see how we've marked out the inside plate, how the inside plate will fit up in there and go over. It'll go up against that cross member there, and again, you can go all the way up to the corner of the cross member. You can pull that back a certain amount depending on how far you may need to go back to clear that hole that is probably there in the rear. But really, Toyota frames are weird. It really rusts out just right there in that specific spot, but the metal around it usually isn't too bad. Overall, though, I would say when you're welding these frames, Toyota frames are made with pretty thin material, so expect some areas to have some difficulty with blowouts, because it is really thin stuff. So let's get to cleaning up both the outside and the inside, and then we'll get these all solid welded. the last piece is this triangle piece here. And that piece actually will go up here next to the inside and basically just help to tie in a little bit more of this cross member running across the frame. Just ensure we have some good structure in our repair. Mark that out. All right, so one last look as we finish up here. One thing I need to mention is that on the passenger side, the exhaust is in a good space where you can get in there and weld. Driver side, it's a lot closer to the frame, makes it a lot more difficult. So now we just need to go in, clean up some of our spatter, some of our mess, and then get it primed and painted and get this out of here. So that'll wrap up this kit install on this 4Runner. Keep an eye out for our other video from this 4Runner here. We're actually going to be installing a kit between the transmission cross member and back to the lower control arm mount. That's also an area that gets very frequent rust in these Toyota 4Runner frames, so we'll have a kit for that. So if you want to see that video, look for that video from us. Thanks for watching. If you're interested in one of these kits, you can find it on taboocustoms.com. You can also contact us there on Taboo Customs or find us on Facebook or Instagram. Thanks.